Good day teachers and to our prof. This will be my last video presentation in our course EdEng 201 Syntax Chapter 6, which is the external evaluation of syntax. Over historical time, languages change at every level of structure, vocabulary, phonology, morphology, and syntax. How and why such change occurs are the key questions addressed by the discipline of historical linguistics. Language change is by definition a failure in the transmission across time of linguistic features. Such failures, in principle, could occur within groups of adult native speakers of language who for some reason substitute one feature for another in their usage, as happens when new words are coined and substituted for the old ones. We have number 1, change and stability. At the level of syntax, the amount of change that languages undergo over a given stretch of time varies tremendously, both from language to language and within the history of a single language. Another example of stability in usage where one might have expected drift is adverb placement in English. We discuss below the loss of verb to infl, v to I movement in late Middle English, for which one piece of evidence is a change in the apparent placement of pre-verbal adverbs. The canonical position of such adverbs in modern English is between the auxiliary verb and the main verb in sentences where both are present. As, for example, we have in number 1, Mary has always preferred lemons to limes. In finite clauses, the adverb appears after the tense verb when it is an auxiliary and before it when it is a main verb, as illustrated in number 2. In 2a, we have lemons are always preferred to limes. In 2b, Mary always prefers lemons to limes. As is well known, Middle English manifested a different placement of the adverb in sentences like to be. Instead of appearing before the verb, it appeared immediately post-verbally. The word order here is less common than that in number 1, but is grammatical and occurs as a regular minoritory pattern in both modern and Middle English texts. It is notable that the grammatically of for implies that to be is structurally ambiguous in modern English, but not in Middle English, because to be contains only one verb, and because that verb does not move in modern English, we cannot tell whether the verb or adverb is in the pre-infl position or in the position between infl and the main verb. The two possibilities can be presented as follows. In 5a, we have IP, Mary always, and VP prefers lemons to limes. We have 5b, IP, Mary, and then always, VP prefer lemons to limes. In Middle English, the verb always moves to infl, so that the word order in to be implies a pre-infl position for the adverb. That is the analysis in number 6. We have IP, Mary always, and then I prefers, and then VP, small ti, and lemons to limes. In Vincent 1976, relying on the work of Kuhn 1974, has proposed a partial solution to finding the causal force behind cross-category harmony, based on the idea that harmony reduces perceptual complexity. As is well known, center-embedded constructions are difficult to process, so much so that recursive center embedding often leads to a breakdown, as in the following standard example. We have number 7a, the dog that the rat beat chased the cat. 7b, the cat that the dog that the rat beat chased died. We have number 2 now, syntactic change and first language acquisition. Understanding the relationship between language acquisition and language change requires answering the question of exactly what conditions of learning lead to the acquisition of a given grammar and how much these conditions must change before a different grammar is learned. Clark and Roberts on French example number 14, though they do not explicitly raise the issue of the absence of a contrast with subordinate clause word order in the case of an SVO language, To see clearly what is at issue, consider the translation of the sentences in number 20 into Swedish, a modern verb medial V2 language. In this illustration right here, the subordinate and main clause word orders are the same and so provide no evidence to a learner, who must rely on the other sentence types, most obviously roots clauses with topicalized constituents like the following, which exhibits XVS order. Like in number 22, the book, the have I not bought, or the book I didn't buy. Now let's move on to number 3, which is the language contact and syntactic change. One equating force for syntactic change, whose existence cannot be doubted, is language contact. Examples of syntactic changes due to contact abound. Perhaps the most famous is the convergence in syntactic features. For example, the absence of the infinitive that characterizes the Balkan languages according to Joseph 1983. A genetically diverse geographical sparse bond in which the Romance language, Romanian, various Slavic languages, Greek, and Albanian have been in contact for many centuries. The loss of V2 in Middle English is a case of a change where there is evidence that contact played a part. And given the important role the discussion of these and similar changes has played in the recent literature on diachronic syntax, the evidence is worth a brief discussion. We should note at the outset that the evidence is, as so often, not conclusive, but it is suggestive and illustrates a line of research likely to grow in importance as the availability of annotated electronic corpora makes statistical studies more practical. Middle English, a northern dialect in which the tense verb move to COMP, and a southern one in which the tense verb move only as far as INFL. The best evidence for this dialect difference is the word order in the sentences with subject pronouns. As we have made mention, V2 in Old English exhibit a peculiarity not found in the other Germanic languages. Topicalized sentences with full noun phrase subjects had XVS order, but those with pronoun subjects had XP Pro V order, as illustrated in examples number 23 and number 24 above. This peculiarity continues into Middle English and in the mainlands of the South, but there is good evidence that the northern dialect behaved differently. It had inversion with pronoun subjects as well as with noun phrase subjects, just as in other Germanic languages. The following example from the rule of Saint Benet is illustrative. In number 29, Pe alde sal shokale parto, or in English, the old shall she call thereto. So as you can see, the difference between the northern and southern dialects is clear from table 22.1 of the frequency of XVS order for sentences with topicalized direct objects with full noun phrase and pronoun subjects respectively. Next in line is the diffusion of syntactic change. Studies of syntactic change, which trace the temporal evolution of the forms in flux, universally report that change is gradual. One of the most extensive studies of this type, Ellegard's study of the rise of the English auxiliary do, Ellegard 1953, contains a graph in figure 22.1 of the frequency of do plus main verb against main verb alone, based on a sample of more than 10,000 tokens. So we have here figure 22.1, the rise of periphraistic do, adapted from Ellegard 1953. The gradualness of change, therefore, fell outside the domain of interest in early generative discussion. More recently, however, it has been recognized that gradualness poses something of a challenge to a theory of grammar because it characterizes not only shifts in stylistic preference but also the diffusion of changes in syntactic parameters settings. Ellegard also gives data about the placement of the frequency adverb never, with respect to the tense verb, which considerably strengthens the case for a close relationship between the rate of syntactic change across context and underlying grammatical nature of the change. As we noted above, in a Middle English sentence with only one verb, the canonical position for never was immediately post-verbal. In example number 3, repeated here as number 30, illustrates the point. In 30, Queen Esther look never with switch an eye. Since the order of the verb and adverb in 30 reflects V to I movement, we expect the order to disappear as that movement is lost, giving way to pre-verbal placement of the adverb. This is indeed what happens, so that modern English allows in illustration number 31A but not in 31B. So here in 31A, Jean never reads this newspaper, while in 31B, Jean reads never this newspaper. So, as a conclusion, Weinreich et al. 1968 divide the problem of change into 5 related sub-problems: the actuation, constraints, transition, embedding, and evaluation. The actuation problem is that of why change in a particular structural feature occurs when it does in a particular language, and why the change may not occur at all in other languages that share the same feature. The constraints problem is that of what changes are possible for a language in a given state. The transition problem is that of how a language moves from one state to a succeeding state, while the embedding and evaluation problems are those of how a change is related to other features of the language in which it occurs and what effect it has on these other features. In the study of syntactic change within the generative tradition, these problems remain basic. That ends my video presentation in Chapter 6 about external evaluation of syntax. Thank you so much for listening.